a force that has incredible power to shape the environment around it. Wildfire has always been a source of fear and uncertainty for people that live within its reach. It's pretty hard to find a natural force that is capable of inflicting more devastation on human civilizations than fire, with its effects becoming all the more evident with increasing populations and climate change. The relationship between humans and fire has been an ongoing fascination since the dawn of our species. Wildfire's unpredictable nature leads to many misconceptions about its very nature, and in modern society has been often viewed as a destructive, ruthless force, as its consequences can easily be seen on the populations affected by its wrath. A fire isn't all death and destruction. It is a powerful manifestation of the forces of nature that seek balance and harmony. And these forces are part of what drives many ecosystems. While we have largely viewed fire in solely a negative context for the majority of modern history, modern ecological study has revealed that fire is not just a part of our ecosystem, but a vital component of the natural processes that maintain the health of our forests. And the power and utility of fire to shape and alter the natural environment is something that cannot be understated. Even with the use of modern technology, we're still unable to completely tame fire, still struggle to replicate the benefits that it provides on the ecosystem through other means of land management. Accepting fire as a part of the natural ecosystem and utilizing its many benefits in the interest of preserving natural resources is only going to become a more critical issue. Traditional methods of fire suppression will need to evolve with the times to keep up with climate change and human expansion, but this also raises ethical concerns when these changes will affect people's lives, and is the value of natural resources and ecological preservation greater than the value of people's property or lives? By the 1900s, America's need for timber had intensified, with a huge housing and construction boom, and this led to a number of changes in land management policy, but one of the biggest changes to forest management was the introduction of widespread fire suppression. The technologies emerging during this era, such as automobiles and airplanes, further increased man's ability to battle forest fires, especially in more remote and uninhabited areas. The introduction of helicopters as a tool for fighting forest fires in the 50s and 60s greatly impacted the firefighters' abilities to reach remote locations. Before having access to these modern methods, wildfires that were far from human settlements were largely ignored, and the only efforts made to fight wildfires was done when a town or a city was in the direct path of a fire. And with these fantastic new advancements of fire suppression technology, the campaign to preserve as much of the timber from the flames had begun. This was, of course, greatly encouraged by anybody that had a private interest in the timber industry, as well as the federal government in efforts to ensure the national timber supply. The movement of protecting national timber interests was the motivation behind the creation of campaigns to raise public awareness about the dangers of wildfire. And none of these campaigns was more popular than Smokey the Bear, who even today is still synonymous with the idea of preventing wildfires. And Smokey would eventually go on to be the poster child for fire prevention and general fire suppression. This attitude of viewing fire as a threat to be fought against was very convincing and permeated culture and public opinion throughout the 20th century. However, this is not always how fire has been viewed, and at some point along the way through the process of colonization, fire became the enemy. The indigenous people that once tended to America made very little effort to suppress fires and instead utilized their benefits to aid them in maintaining the health of the ecosystems that provided them with their resources. Examples of this include setting fires in grasslands under oak trees, burning away brush and killing insects that would burrow into the acorns. And this had a twofold effect, as the burn would simultaneously make it easier for the oak trees to reproduce, and for the local populations to be able to increase the yields of their acorn harvests. Unfortunately, the practices of the indigenous peoples were largely lost, as their populations were devastated across the United States and controlled burning became illegal under federal law. These disputes over controlled burns have culminated in several lawsuits against the federal government, such as the case involving the Colville Confederated Tribes, in which tribes lost land and property as a result of insufficient fuels management partially as a result from restricted controlled burning practices. And the damaging effects of fire are not simply limited to what they burn when firefighting becomes a part of that process. Modern firefighting techniques often involve the use of chemical fire suppressants, as water is often too quick to evaporate and dissipates in the air when dropped from a firefighting aircraft. And this is often how fires are fought, especially in remote areas that are inaccessible to firefighting crews. The red mist that can be seen dropping from these fire suppression aircraft is a mixture of inorganic salts and other chemicals that form an inflammable barrier, which is intended to halt a fire's path. These mixtures contain chemicals that are designed to create a flame-retardant barrier, preventing the ignition of flammable materials and halting the progression of a blaze. And while these mixtures are mandated to only contain chemicals that are deemed safe by the Forest Services, there is still significant concern for the long-term effects of dropping large amounts of these chemicals into the soil. Ammonium phosphate, which is typically used as an agricultural fertilizer, is the primary ingredient used in many of these blends of fire suppressant chemicals. But there's also significant concentrations of heavy metals, such as chromium, manganese, copper, arsenic, cadmium, and more. And these are some potentially very harmful chemicals to have introduced into the environment, so there is significant concern for contamination, especially in runoff into local waterways. This is why the Forest Service bans the use of aerial retardant drops in areas that are home to endangered species or contain waterways. However, that ban is subject to being lifted in circumstances where human life or public safety are threatened. And with an ever-increasing size and population that lives in remote areas, thanks to technology and population density increasing, there is significant business interests that are affected by wildfire, which means that the use of these chemicals is more common than ever. Many species of conifers, especially pines, exhibit a characteristic known as serotiny, and this is the process of the tree releasing its seeds in a post-fire environment due to the way that the seeds are released from the cone. The seeds are held tightly in a resinous bond that is perfectly suited to melt under the heat of a forest fire, and once the cones are sufficiently heated, the seeds are released and sprout in the ashes of the burned forest. Not only is this a process that capitalizes on forest fires and their destructive property to birth a new generation of trees, but this process is in fact critical to the health and life cycle of these trees. If the forest isn't allowed to burn, the trees will just continue to accumulate cones and dwindle in health until the forest is inevitably burned. Because of this, many serotinous species need to be manually removed or die from causes other than fire. And if the tree never encounters a fire in its lifetime, there is a significantly reduced chance of the tree reproducing. So this will ultimately have long-term consequences on the genetic makeup of our forests if fire suppression continues. While there's no doubt that wildfires are a vital part of the forest ecosystem, the ecological significance of them must feel insignificant to the people who find themselves at its mercy. Throughout the 21st century, we've seen an unprecedented increase in both the frequency and severity of wildfires. And this is partially due to modern monitoring systems and the increased frequency of human civilizations in remote areas where a fire would have long gone unnoticed or ignored. One of the worst fires to ever occur in terms of sheer property damage was the Camp Fire that ravaged the city of Paradise, California back in 2018, causing estimated damage in the billions of dollars and destroying more than 18,000 structures, displacing over 50,000 people. The destruction that wildfires have inflicted in the last few decades has been some of the worst witnessed in human history. The impact of wildfires spreads beyond just its local community, and the air pollution from massive fires can be seen having a significant impact on the global atmosphere. When it comes to the issues of fighting wildfires, there really is no easy, clear-cut solution. The ecological importance of wildfires is undeniable to the many species that have adapted to live with this phenomenon since the dawn of time. However, the reality of the situation is that there really is no alternative to fighting fires, as human settlements continue to expand to all corners of the earth. Despite the disruption to natural ecological processes, soil erosion and degradation, and generally reduced forest health, the priority will always be to protect people's health, livelihoods, and property. This issue showcases the difficulties we have as humans with accepting the limits of the natural environment and its ability to provide for us. We want all the benefits that the forest provides, but we're unwilling to allow it to continue many of its natural processes that have maintained its ecosystems for millennia. The finite nature of natural resources is starting to become very painfully obvious as we witness the long-term effects of careless land management. It is the very nature of our species to bend nature to our will, but we might have to become a little more flexible ourselves. Thanks for watching.